like women get out of relationships and they're like, who am I going to live with? Who am I going to be with? Who's going to, be a father to my child? And I'm like chill, because you got to like really recuperate and recover first. You should spend time alone before moving on. But I can understand like companionship is a human need, and like, people really push towards it because we're just biologically designed to want it. I want to emphasize when I speak to women, like there is a time and place, right? You have to be healthy internally to be able to receive a healthy partner, and then in turn make it into a healthy relationship. When you're in like this la la land of like just, in a relationship, you're newly in, and like you feed yourself some false narratives and you start to believe them. And we as women, we do that a lot as well. Like we just need to see things for what they are sometimes, versus like feeding ourselves these narratives that are just like not truthful at all.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of What's Brown Got to Do with It. So today I am joined by a very special guest. Many of you may know her as an influencer, as a real estate broker by day. She's also the author of the Muslim Girlfriend's Guide series to divorce. Most importantly, she's a full-time mom. So it's my pleasure to welcome Saira Hayat Khan. Saira, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Hi, I'm so excited.
Me too. So when I was thinking and curating topics that I wanted to kind of talk about and touch on, when it came to the podcast, divorce, single parenting, and just women empowerment was really like high on my list. Right. And you came to mind straight away because I've personally been following you for years. I feel like I've seen your journey, and, I'm so happy to, mashallah, like see you in the place that you're in now. But I know it's been a journey for you.
It is definitely a journey. Yeah. You don't just wake up and get to a point where you're like, okay, but yeah, it definitely is a journey.
Oh, exactly. And I feel like it just, there were so many parallels between our kind of own experiences. So you were like number one on my list to speak to about this. And when you said yes, I was like over the moon. I didn't even have to, convince you. So thank you so much for being here today.
Well, so let's appreciate you thinking of me.
No, my pleasure. So let's talk a little bit about your journey. Let's start from there. How long have you been divorced?
So I essentially got divorced. It's funny because I got married in 2009 and I married out of my choice. I met this guy that was great. He's still great. And we got married. I was 22 years old. He was 27. And we didn't spend too much time together. I kind of like brought him home to my dad after 30 days of knowing him. And we stayed married for a good 4 or 5 years. And then we took a separation for a year. And in that separation, we realized that we actually want to try to work it out. So we got back together. We had a baby. And then we realized it really wasn't working. So we split up permanently in 2018. I believe my daughter was 13 months. So in 2018, It's been how long? I lost track, like 5-6 years.
Yeah, it's been, probably around that time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so like, how was that for you? I mean, having a child in the mix and so young, that's
right.
That's really hard.
I was 30 years old when I had her, so I don't feel like it was young because by then I had seen so much. From I think my mom, when I got married, she was sick, so I saw her be sick, and then I saw my dad pass away, and then 9 months later, my mom passed away. And so you grow up a lot in the midst of those experiences, right? And then I had a struggling marriage, and then I had a baby. I had a struggling pregnancy. It was a very difficult pregnancy, and then a difficult time while she was 12 months because obviously I was struggling in my marriage. And so when I took the decision to split, it was obviously very scary at the time. I didn't know what I was signing up for. I was kind of like a spoiled housewife who was, very oblivious to what kind of payments were to be made, what kind of bills were due. I didn't know anything about, finances. Whatever money I made, I was able to keep to myself. I didn't have to contribute it to the household, which he was great for. But when we split, obviously there's a little bit of a transition period where you kind of have to figure everything out. So in the midst of just even beyond finances, just, how to take care of my daughter on my own. I didn't have a parent's house. Girls technically sometimes, majority of the time, they'll get divorced and then they'll go back to their parents' houses, right? So there's that comfort, security blanket. I didn't have that. I had three brothers who were all married, had their own families, who were supportive emotionally and with their time, and great sisters-in-law. I had great, extended family who was supportive. And that was the biggest thing for me. I deal with girls and I speak to women now who don't have supportive families. And I'm just like, I don't know how you manage. I have this one girl that I'm currently working with, and her mom, she's in an abusive relationship and her mother is telling her to stay. And I'm just like, how? Like, I have a daughter of my own. And if she one day came to me and was like, he's beating me up, he's not loyal, he is not contributing financially to the household, I would be like the first one to save her, So, of course, so when you're going through the natural process of divorce, you are very fearful of the unknown. You're fearful of the future. You're fearful of how society will, deem you, how they'll look at you, and how you'll just manage day-to-day responsibilities.
I do think that a lot of people stay in marriages, whether it's abusive, like physically, mentally, emotionally, anything like that, because of the fear of the unknown. So, I was myself married for 10 years, and looking back at it, it was a dead marriage from day one. It was literally 9 years too many. But, and I've always was very strong, very independent. I was, working, earning financially. I was providing for everybody. But it was always like, but what's going to happen if he's not there?
Right.
And I find that when I talk to women, they're just so fearful of like, but what's going to happen to me? So that like the abuse is coming, the emotional abuse, whatever it is, you expect that. But not knowing what life will be like walking away, it's sad that that's actually scarier or, more daunting than actually being so unhappy.
Yeah, so it's there's a term called toxic dependency, right? And when you are in a toxic marriage, which a lot of us have seen ourselves, whether it's a marriage or a relationship, we kind of build this dependency on our partner. And it's really all in our head. Like, what value are they even bringing to your life that you're dependent on, right? And I remember I was once speaking to a therapist, and she was like, "What are you holding on to?" And I'm just like, no, what did I say to her? I was venting about, oh, he doesn't do this and he doesn't do that, or doesn't take out the garbage, or doesn't, clean up after himself. And she's like, that's not what you need a marriage for. You don't need a marriage for someone to take the garbage out. Like, what kind of value does he bring to your life emotionally and like mentally, and how is he good for your self-development and growth? And I couldn't think of a thing, and but as our, the thing with South Asian women is we are really nurtured into thinking that a marriage or a relationship is very defining of who you are. And I have just come into a healthy a relationship now, and I see how my audience has kind of changed their tune with me. They're so interested in what's happening. They're so interested in what's happening. And like all my questions, I do these weekly question and answers, and majority of them are about my relationship. And I'm just like, there's so much more that I bring to the table or offer the world beyond my relationship status. And but because a lot of my audience is South Asian, that's what they find interest in, right? And that's what they think that's what, as women, we're just nurtured to believe that's what we're striving towards: a relationship, a husband, a marriage, of being a mother, and that's your purpose in life.
So what's really interesting is my son, he's just turned 15. And when we
15-year-old.
Thank you. But it's insane. I've learned so much from him. When I got divorced, he was like 7 or 8 years old. And at that time, he was very like, you're never allowed to get married again. And he was very adamant, like, you're never, ever. Now, he's very much like, you need to find somebody, and I want you to find somebody. And so one day I was like, it's okay if I don't. And he said, but I don't want you to be alone. I don't want you to be lonely.
Mm-hmm.
And it really struck me that, and I had to say to him that, Aman, you know, a relationship doesn't define me. It doesn't define me. It doesn't define my happiness. I
Mm-hmm.
can be alone and I can be content and peace. And that's what it is. And it took
Mm-hmm.
me a long time to kind of understand that. But even from a child's perspective, it's, you know, we're kind of, they're taught as well that this whole 2.4 children, you know, a house with a picket fence, this is the ideal.
Right.
But
Well,
it's really not.
as humans, we're biologically designed to seek
Mm,
companionship, just like we need food, air, water, our necessities.
yeah.
Companionship is something that we are made for, right? So,
Mm,
I mean, his perspective is just, internal, really. It's, something he's probably watched on TV, and he's not wrong. I mean, I was content before I got into a relationship. I was more
mm,
than content. I was at peace. I had a great routine with my daughter. I had a thriving career. I had a lot of purpose, and I really grew the most as a human being when I was alone. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I
mm,
was with somebody else. But now that I am with somebody else, and it is a contributing partner who brings so much value to my life, so much value. Like I would have never been able to imagine what a
mm,
healthy relationship looks like until I really met him. And I can understand um, the need or the desire for it. Um, but
mm.
I want to emphasize when I speak to women, like there is a time and place, right? You
Agreed.
have to
Yeah.
be healthy internally to
Mm,
be able to receive a healthy partner and then in turn make it into a healthy relationship. And you
mm.
really can't do that until you spend a good amount of time alone after you're divorced or after a breakup or after the demise of any relationship,
Oh,
right? You have
yeah.
to
Yeah.
that concept of healing, we love to talk about healing,
Mm.
right? But what is like is there a destination you really get to once you've spent that time healing? Healing is ever, evolutionary. Is that the right term? You're constantly
Yeah, of
evolving as a
course. Yeah.
person, right? And these different like women get out of relationships and they're like, who am I going to live with, who am I going to be with, who's going to
Mm.
be a father to my child? And I'm like chill, because you gotta like really recuperate and recover first. You should spend time alone before moving on. But I can understand like companionship is a human needs, and like people really push towards it because we're just biologically designed to want it.
Yeah, there is that, but there's also, you know, the grooming as, you know, we're growing up, and there's so much more of like when women are settling, like, you know, I'm just going to settle because in your own mind, this is the best that you can get. And if you
Mhm.
feel that this is what you deserve, then it's kind of like, what is it when the manifestation or the energy, you know, they say that you get what you put out. So
Totally.
if you can't value yourself, and 100%, I think it took a divorce for me to spend time alone and actually think about what my values were
Mhm.
first and foremost, what I believe in, what I want my son to kind of understand and how to raise him before I can even think about bringing someone else back into my life. And I
you
think a
know
lot of women do miss that.
Totally. The thing is, in our culture we get married early, right? And
Mm,
at 22, 23, 24 years old, you don't know who you are. At 27, you don't even know who you are, right?
yeah.
And so we don't have our own self identity established, right? And then we get married, we become mothers, we become wives, we become daughter in laws, and that's our identity. But who are we individually? Like, who are we? Who is Saira Hayat Khan? Like, I had to ask myself that. Who am I outside of being a mother or a wife or a sister?
Mm,
I'm an independent, and as an independent, like, what are my interests? What do I like? What do I want out of life? And I'm constantly discovering different ways of how I want to spend my life as time goes on, as my roles change, and I always tell women to do this exercise where they basically write out what they want out of life. I'm a big journaler, and journaling has been a
right.
big part of my practice for the last 10 years. And it's been huge in my growth and my self-development.
Mm,
And I tell women all the time, like, what do you want out of life? Like, what is it that you want? And they're like, we want kids. And I'm like, so how are you going to get kids? Like, you need a man to have kids, obviously. But what kind of, everyone can get married. Anyone can get married, but it's very difficult to stay married. And so what do you need to be as a person to attract what you want in a partner? And if I had met my current partner 10 years ago, would I be able to receive him in the same way? No, definitely not, because
No.
I wasn't healthy. I had my own toxic contributions to my marriage. Like, I can't pin it completely on my ex-husband. We didn't work as a dynamic because I wasn't internally happy. Like, my parents had just passed away. I was just going through grieving, and like I wasn't able to process the things that were happening in my life. And a lot of the times it came out in my behaviors. And same thing with him. We were children. Like, we don't know who we are as adults and individuals, right? So women don't get that chance to like really self-discover. They don't have that self-discovery phase because we get out of school and we get married, right? But if you really truly spend that time alone and you're beneficial with how, like, productive with how you spend that time, you can really go on this like incredible journey of self-discovery and establish who you are as an independent, and then be able to go into a relationship attracting naturally what you are and what you deserve.
Well, yeah, exactly what you deserve. I live in the Middle East, and I don't have any family here. All my family is back home in London.
Yeah, that must be so hard.
And so at the beginning, it was really bizarre because I felt like I also had this point to prove that I can manage on my own and I can be the best mom. And, I mean, credit where it's due. My ex husband, he was a great dad. He was a great father, but he was very hands-on when he was in our life.
Right.
And then after our divorce, like he kind of stopped being hands-on, like he disappeared, and it's more of a, relationship of convenience, I would say. But it was a point to me, I had to this point to prove like, no, I can do everything on my own and I don't need anybody. I would burn myself to the ground. And, like I'm going to work, I'm going to school, I'm going to all the football matches, I'm, doing, my life revolved around my child. Right. And some parents used to say to me that, listen, if you want to just leave, have him sleep over at ours for a weekend, it's fine. I'm like, no, because God forbid anybody thinks that I have left my child to go out and, do my own thing and I can't cope and look after my own child and other people are looking after him. So that was really hard because I didn't appreciate the help around and the support around me. It was only after a while when my best friend was like, listen, you need to stop. Like, you need to actually now make time for yourself because your life is revolving around Aman and it's great. But there's going to be a time when he's not going to be there and then you won't know what to do with yourself. Right. I'm kind of at that point now. So like, what do you do? Because you actually co-parent and you co-parent quite well. So how did you learn to let go? Because Raya must have been really young then. I mean, she was when you guys
she was
divorced.
13 months. So letting her go, I mean, at 13 months and I'll be like, the first to say when we split, we did not have a very healthy dynamic. It was extremely toxic. It was very power driven. It was egotistical. And I really had to take a step back and be like, listen, what do you want out of life? Like, I always circle back to that. And I had decided very early on in our divorce that I want a healthy dynamic. Like, I have no ill will towards my ex-husband. I have, and reality is I'm stuck with him forever. Whether I like it or not, I'm stuck with him forever. And what I have to do is I have to make the best of it. And he was just as involved in her upbringing and he was just as interested. So I know a lot of fathers, they kind of take a step back and, they disappear or whatever. They don't take on as much responsibility. And I had decided, like, I'm going to do everything in my ability to make sure this guy steps up. And there was a little bit of a point where I had to condition and train him. And then he took on. And I'll be honest, like, I had to keep it cool with his mom. I had to keep it cool with his dad. Whether I agreed with the way certain things unfolded or not, I had a bigger picture in mind. And having that bigger picture allowed me to navigate in a way where I was strategic with my decisions. So not being reactive, not constantly being responsive to every battle, right? And allowing myself, and he did the same. I'll be honest, like he was very, he still till this day, sometimes when we're feuding about something, we'll be like, oh, he'll be like, okay, listen, this isn't a big deal. Like, why are we fighting? What's the point of fighting? Like, we're on the same page, we're on the same team. And I'll do that as well. But to circle back, when I essentially got divorced, I had 3 brothers and 3 sisters-in-law who were really incredible, and we all have kids the same age. And I really tapped into my support system, and I think people don't do that enough, and that's what gets them burnt out. I got burnt out. Like, I mean, even with my support system, I got burnt out because having to manage everything that I mean, like, I'll be honest, I don't collect any child support. I don't collect any spousal support. I didn't walk away from my divorce with $1. And
Same.
I paid out the house on my own. I bought him out, and which is what a decision I made. And it was a big pill for me to swallow, because having to take on that big of a financial burden. I mean, you understand. You live in Dubai, right? And Dubai is a very expensive place to live, from what I gather. And same, I live in Toronto, and Toronto is like, our houses here are extremely expensive. So for me to take on an entire home when I had no background of what kind of financial burden it takes to keep a house, taking that on was very difficult. So I was able, thank goodness, like, I give a lot of credit to my brothers and my sisters-in-law for being able to support me. So when I have like a showing, when I have to go to work, I'll call my brother and be like, can I drop her for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever it is. I did that. One thing we couldn't get over was sleeping. Like, I still have this thing where I can't let her sleep anywhere beyond her dad's house.
Her dad.
Yeah. And we tried it. Like, we tried it very recently, and she just wasn't as receptive to it, because she sleeps and then she wakes up and she's just like, I want my mom or my dad. And so I've been like, kind of have PTSD. So the sleepover thing, we haven't been able to manage. But I feel like it does, when they say it takes a village, it really does take a village. And I've been really blessed with having one of my brothers moved to Texas, but I have 2 great brothers and even better sisters-in-law who are so open to loving Raya the way they love their own kids. And so I have no reservations about dropping her there. And alhamdulillah, like, I'm so grateful for that, because it's like one of my biggest assets and my biggest blessings. But without them, I really couldn't sleep the same way at night.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's also important, like, I have friends who are divorced as well, and they found it really difficult to let go. In the UK, you know, like, most of the times the father does get like custody, or 50% or whatever, maybe weekends or every other weekend.
Right.
So I do have friends who you know, the exes are completely toxic, but they have to still send their kids to their parents, and changing that mindset. And instead of being like, okay, you know, I have to, my daughter's leaving me and I don't know what to do, actually taking that time out to think like, this is my time. This is, you know, my opportunity. Because like you said, you get burnt out. It's so easy to get burnt out, and
it's so tough
you need to recuperate.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And if you don't, and it's the emotional, the
mental load that drains you more.
Absolutely. I found it really difficult to not be, I mean, to this day, my son doesn't know anything about, you know, why we got divorced, or any of the ins and outs of our divorce, our relationship prior to that. Like, as far as, and this is something a therapist once told me, she said, as far as kids are concerned, that's my mom and that's my dad, and that's all they know. They don't need to know the in-betweens. Right. And when you start pitting against each other, that's when it really kind of affects. It's so unhealthy. And so that's actually a lot more difficult, though, because, you know, human nature is, I would want to say like, well, actually that's not true, and you don't know anything, and you know, he'll come home and, you know, his dad's told him something, like, that's a lie. But it's much harder to be like, okay, better, you know. It's like great. Like
I like, you know, it's something I really struggle with him, especially. Like, I'm always telling him it's not her problem. Like, you know, you talk to me for like 10 minutes a week, just in that 10 minutes, put your best foot forward. And my daughter, she's such a daddy's girl, right? And I encourage it. I was a huge daddy's girl, and I wanted the same for my daughter because I know the value that my father brought to my life. He gave me my confidence. He gave me my security. He gave me a lot of my strength. And it comes, like my best friend and I always say, my confidence comes from my father, because whether or not my dad believed I could do something, he always made me believe I could do it. And so, and my ex was very lucky enough to see the relationship between me and my father, and he always says to me, he's like, I want Raya and I to be the same way. Like it was our example that really drove or motivated my ex. He tells me that all the time. And so when Raya's like, I miss Baba, or like, because naturally, of course, she's not seeing her dad for 3-4 days a week. She'll be like, I miss Baba. And I'll say things like, I miss Baba too. And I'm just like, like, I don't miss him, but I say it just to make her feel like, okay, we're all on the same page. And like, I really take the time out, and I'm like, okay, let's call Baba. Let's tell Baba. Let's update Baba. Let's show Baba, even though I don't want to see his face 10 times a day. Right. But I do it. And a lot of the times he does things like men. I don't feel like fathers are very strategic with their parent, or maybe that's just the case with me, but her mental health is a big priority of mine, especially because they're growing up in this era where everything is digital and accessible at fingertips and all this information overload. I am a very strict parent in the sense that she doesn't have access to technology. She doesn't have an iPad. She doesn't go on my phone. She doesn't play games on my phone, And so our parenting styles sometimes can be conflicting. And sometimes I just want to tell her, like, Baba doesn't know what he's doing in this regard, okay? And I know what's better, but like I can't. Or like, if he's a little bit more temperamental than I am, and although it's very rare, but he is a lot, he can tend to sometimes be a little bit more expressive in front of her, and I choose to play neutral. But it is a lot, and I just keep reminding myself, this might be the one good deed that gets you into heaven. So just be quiet and just bear a little bit. I don't know, like I just find ways to I have so much patience for him now. I haven't always, but is that a fire alarm? Or is that a car alarm? Oh,
it's the fire alarm.
Okay. So I mean, it's short-term sacrifice for long-term gain. We're really protecting their mental health by not unloading on them. And it's something I learned from my parents, actually. I never saw my parents fight. I remember one fight they probably had when we were traveling to Florida. But beyond that, I never saw conflict in my parents, and I never knew what the problems were. And I saw a very loving, healthy dynamic growing up. And I know how much it protected me and my mental health and damage the damage they didn't give me. And I want to be able to let my child be a child. She's turning 7 this year, and I want her to care about Elsa and like what dress she's going to put her in, and like her parents' problems shouldn't be her problems.
And actually, like for that generation, not seeing parents argue is more, I would say, of an exception than the norm, because a lot of people have grown up in households where it is normal to argue, or they do see talks. There was a lot of empty shell marriages, where people stay in marriages. I mean, even for me, I think my dad was very much like, from day one, like, you need to walk away. You need to just walk away. I think a few times my mum must have said, no, you should try and make it work. But my dad was like, no, like, why are you still there?
Right.
And again, you stay because you think it's the right thing to do for your children.
Right.
And you think that, no, a child needs a mom and a father.
Right.
And I was a believer in that, but I really don't believe that anymore. I actually believe that children need to be in safe and peaceful environments. That's more important for their mental health than to be in these marriages or to be a part of toxicity where all they're seeing is unhappiness and arguments and thinking that that's normal. Like that's not normal.
Honestly, I am of the belief that conflict isn't a bad thing. Like, I mean, it's exposure to conflict is great. It's healthy because it's the fact of life. It's the recovery from conflict, which is important for the children to see as well, just as important as seeing the conflict, because they're going to have conflict, whether we like it or not, whether we shell them into this like perfect ideal world, they will face conflict. The key is to help shape them in a way where they can deal with conflict in a healthy manner. And if you show them an example of healthy resolution, they will mimic that in
Yeah,
their
that's
lives,
it. Yeah.
right? And that was my parents. Like my parents, they're a rarity from their generation for sure. But my dad was the type that if there was conflict, like I got in trouble at school a bunch, right? And my dad would call a family meeting. You know, he would put us in the dining room and be like, what's going on? And this and that. And this is how we're going to work towards being better. And this is what goes in this house and this is what's not allowed. And it was a very healthy dynamic, I'll be honest. And I don't know if my brothers will say the same thing because my dad was a lot softer with me than he was my brothers. But
are you the youngest? Where are you in the sibling ranking?
I'm the youngest, but I'm the only girl. So I have 3 brothers. And so my dad was, without even, I think he was not even aware, but he really cared about our mental health. And mental health growing up wasn't as big of a topic as it is now. But I would say, personally, I'm pretty, despite everything I've seen at a very young age, and obviously, like, you know, they say you incur trauma before the age of 25, your prefrontal cortex doesn't develop properly. And I'm a true testament to that. Like, I mean, I suffer from ADHD, self-diagnosed, but I like totally, when I do have my own mental health issues, I am the first person who will acknowledge it and try to do better. And that's the key to life. Like just being able to see, you know, if there's a conflict, how to resolve it. And like, you know, because a lot of the times these marriages fall apart because there isn't sufficient conflict resolution. It's not healthy. Like, and it's so important because one person can be of a healthy mental state, but if the other person is not willing to receive it or contribute the same, I don't see like a lot of marriages like that working, right? Whereas now I'm finally in a healthy dynamic and I see how much my partner brings to the table and I try to match it because he's a lot more mentally healthy than I am for sure. But they're just, that's the key. The key is having a good amount of conflict resolution where you can keep building on top of it, right? Like people start to build resentment and they build like, you know, their own animosities, and that's where things start to plummet.
But you had, I mean, to your point, you had good role models, like your parents, like were, by the sounds of it, they were really great role models. So you were able to learn from that. And that's the worry because a lot of, you know, kids or a lot of people in those situations don't have the greatest role models. So, you know, a lot of South Asians, I mean, I think it's changing a lot now with education, but, you know, if there was a certain generation where it was very misogynistic and, you know, people were just seeing that, okay, those defined roles that a woman should be working in the kitchen and a woman should be looking after the kids and, you know, no right to complain. I remember when I got married, I couldn't cook. And my ex and I actually met at university and he knew I couldn't cook. And it was never, the only thing I could make was this cheese and onion and chili toasty, like a grilled cheese sandwich. But mind you, it was really good. Shout out to my friend Rihanna who taught me how to make that. And I remember one day my ex came over to my mum's and I made him this toasty. So did you like it? And he said, yeah, it's really delicious. I said, oh, good, because you're going to be eating that for the rest of your life. And he was like, uh-huh. So he knew I couldn't cook. I mean, beside that one toast, he knew. We got married and then there was suddenly like the next day this expectation that I'm going to start making like these 5-course meals. And I was like, but I can't cook. And so he was an excellent cook, like an excellent cook. So I was like, why don't you teach me? And he said, your mum should have taught you. And I just thought like, you know, you would learn. I was like, but then you lied to yourself. I didn't lie to you. You made up this narrative in your head whereby your ideal wife is, you know, a cook. And so I'm sorry to disappoint, but it just doesn't, like life doesn't happen that way. There are things that I'll bring to the table. You might bring the dal to the table, you know, great. It's great dal. And I might bring cheese toasties. They're great cheese toasties.
That's what happens when you're in like this la la land of like just, you know, in a relationship you're newly in and like you feed yourself some false narratives and you start to believe them and And we as women, we do that a lot as well. Like, I mean, I had a question and answer yesterday. The girl was like, if he doesn't give me security and he's not expressive, what does that mean? And I was like, girl, like, that means he's not giving you security and he's not expressive. Like, what are you looking for? You know,
Yeah.
like as women, we need security. Like, we can't thrive in a relationship without security, you know? And so, like, we just need to see things for what they are sometimes versus like feeding ourselves these narratives that are just like not truthful at
But
all.
it's also like a lot of women think that, oh, I can change him. He'll
Oh
change. Like
yeah,
if I show him enough love and if I
I've done
show
that.
him do all
I
of
have done
this,
that.
then it
It is.
might change
It's like, you
things.
know, we love
But the
projects,
reality
right?
is, it
And
doesn't change.
yeah, no, it doesn't. Like, but the thing is, like, we feel like we want to take on this role, or like, I don't know why we do it, but I always tell women now, I'm like, you know, there was a point in my life when I was like 20, 21, 22, I could afford to take on a project because I was a project, right? I was
Mm,
okay with settling with someone who had potential. Now,
mm,
at this age, knowing what I bring to the table, I want someone who's met their potential. I don't want a
yeah.
project. I want someone that doesn't bring every single thing I want to the table. And I would have thought that was delusional back in the day, that I want,
Mm.
there's certain things that I want. Like, I wanted a certain cocktail of men that was very unachievable. And now I've gotten there, and I'm just like, you know, it was worthwhile. The wait was worthwhile, waiting for everything I want and not wasting time and being delusional and picking up these projects was all worth it, because
And
it saves you from a lot of damage.
absolutely. And being very clear about what you want. I mean, everyone laughs at her, at this Seema auntie and the Indian matchmaker about that, 60-70%, but she's
Mhm.
not actually wrong, because you're
What is
not
I'm
going to.
familiar. What is her 60-70% rule?
Oh, so she, when she does matchmaking, so she asks her clients, like, what is your criteria? So they give this whole list of, like, I want this, 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 this. And so
Mhm.
she's always like, look, if you might find somebody that meets 60 or 70% of your criteria,
Mhm.
then that's a winner, because you're not going to find everyone, someone that's going to meet everything, which is true. But it's about, and I think this is, again, with age, with experience, knowing what we know now, as opposed to when you're younger. And rightly said, when you're younger, you're like, yeah, it is kind of a la la and we'll grow together. At this age, if I meet a guy and if he's not settled, and if he doesn't know what he wants, and if he's not bringing something to the table, then he's never going to do that. Like,
Mhm.
at this age, I would expect a certain level of maturity, a certain level of settlement, a
Mhm.
certain level, like, of understanding,
Mhm.
because we're not in our 20s anymore. And if that
Yeah.
doesn't happen, then it's just not needed.
You know, above all, everything, like, I mean, everybody has a different desire of what they want in their ideal partner. But for me, one of my non-negotiables is emotional intelligence. And I have put a lot of time into becoming emotionally intelligent, and I will never settle for anything less than, because you can have someone who is settled financially and will buy you everything in the world. You won't have to bring a dollar to the table, and, like, you know, everything else that women desire naturally. But we don't look for men who are emotionally intelligent enough, because if a man is emotionally intelligent, he will see his flaws and look to improve them. And he will see value in improving himself, for himself first and foremost, and then for you, right? And that comes with emotional intelligence. If you don't have that emotional intelligence, you, your experience with your partner isn't going to be as riveting. It isn't going to be as purposeful. It won't be as, like, you know, satisfying. Like, I can really, like, with my current partner, I can really sit down and tell him the depths of my traumas, and he will literally sit there and listen. I've never done that with anyone. I've never even done it with my best friends. And he will sit there and give me such great insight as to why I am the way I am, because of what I've gone through when I was like 18 years old. Um and it's brought so much, it's unraveled my brain in a way that nobody hasn't been able to. And you don't understand how um how good it feels until you experience it. And I feel like women, we settle for so little sometimes. We want someone who will be a good dad, or and it takes so little to be a good dad. Like, you know, like there was like TikTok that I watched. It takes so little to be a good dad. It's so
Yeah.
little to be a bad mom, you know. And like it was like a funny example. I want to share it actually. The girl was going on about how she would show up to her, you know, appointments for her ultrasound. She was pregnant, and the nurse was like, oh my God, how supportive of a partner is he? Like, he came and showed up to your appointment, and she's like, what about me? I'm doing all the heavy lifting here, you know, like
Yeah.
he's that you're like, you know, commending him for his behaviors, where
It's
as
so
we're
true. Because
expected
the
to.
standards that we've set for fathers
Mhm,
is so low that
totally.
they can
But we
exceed that
allow
above and beyond.
we
Yeah,
allow it.
exactly.
Like, as women, we are okay with that. We're just like, oh yeah, great. Like, I want a great dad. Like, yeah, fine, he's a great dad, but is he a great husband? You know, is he a good partner? Does
Mm,
he care about you? Does he care about your feelings? Does he care about how you feel? And like, you know, it's we settle for so little. And there's a saying that like it went on for so long because we allowed it. Like, for example,
mm,
abuse or emotional, whatever
mm.
it might be, you know, torment, whatever it is, neglect, abandonment. It happened for so long. We stuck it out in these 10-year long marriages because we allowed it to,
Mm.
right? And women, we gotta like really, we don't have a big pool of selection in terms of our partners, because the status of men these days is so below mediocre. And my heart like really
Mm.
hurts for these women who don't have children and they want children, and the only way they're going to have children obviously is if they get married. And um
They
but
settle. But this is why actually I think that you get so many questions and that people are so interested in your current relationship, because people want to know, like, how have you done
right.
it? Like, I speak to so many people. A lot of them say to me, why are you still single? Like, why haven't you met anybody? I'm like, it's really hard. Like, where do
Totally.
you meet people now? Like, how
Mhm.
do you meet people? Everyone here is married. Where
Mhm.
I live, like, everyone around me is married.
Mhm.
So where do you go? Do you go on these apps? You have to have a certain level of patience, and then you hear all these nightmare, like Tinder swindler stories
Oh
type.
my gosh, it's so scary. And I get that question a lot, like about where
Mm,
did you find him, or like, and apps about. I have no exposure to apps. Like, I never, because like when we were growing up, I'm 36 years old, turning 37. When we were growing up, we didn't have apps. Um, the concept of meeting someone organic is how it happened for us, you know.
mm,
And I wasn't willing to leave that mindset. I didn't want to go out there looking for a partner. And I know, I understand you have to in this day and age. How are you supposed to? And like a lot of my makeup artist friends, they're like 90% of the marriages are from apps, right? And again, like, it's easy to get married, like, but the point is, are we finding
mm,
quality men that we can stay married to, right? And
mm,
a lot of the times, I mean, it's women that are coming to me complaining about the status of their marriages. It's not men. So I don't know what women are
mm.
and men, but the stories are horrible. Like, um,
Absolutely.
and so like finding somebody good enough. I mean, like, I feel like for me, how it happened to me was extremely organic, like extremely organic. And like my like my partner isn't even from here. He grew up in Pakistan, you know, like he
Mm,
came to Toronto in like 2000 when he was going to university. He did his last year of high school here, went to UFT, and then he went back to Pakistan, right? And then he came back here
mm.
just like 4 or 5 years ago. And like the way we met
All
was
right.
not meant for us to be meeting like that. Um, and like, you know, people from back home, they don't have that social or mental awareness, because
Mm,
their environment doesn't allow it. And where he's from, like, I mean, he grew up in a very toxic environment, right?
mm.
And just the social setting was very toxic from what I gather. And the fact that he's picked himself up off of that and he's become this, honestly, like, I don't want to say it because he's mine, but he is an incredibly amazing human being. Like, he wants
Mm,
good for people. He is honest and truthful, and he thinks about my daughter in ways that I don't even think about her, you know. And like,
mm.
he has this he just he just wants good for everybody. And like, you know, like, he genuinely enjoys wholesome things, right?
Has
And
he been married before?
He's been married before. His marriage
Okay.
wasn't long lasting. I mean, I don't want to say too much about his personal
No,
life.
no, no, that's fine. But I think like that's important as well because, a lot of people, again, a lot of men have this mindset that I don't want to meet somebody with a child or someone, a woman that's been married
And
before. Like,
honestly, I was of that mindset. I was like, like I've already had such a difficult time because I've been in survival mode my whole life. I didn't want to take on someone with another child because I didn't think that I could be that kind of mother to
mm,
somebody else's child because I was just struggling with motherhood on my own to my own child, right?
mm,
But he is just his brain, mashallah, is just so big, and his heart is
mm,
so big. Like he really just thinks about the bigger picture in all elements, and it takes a very
mm,
emotionally intelligent human being to be able to do that, and not
mm,
try to inflict damage. He literally has zero ego, and for men, ego is like a big killer of their personality. For
oh God, yeah.
I
Oh God,
honestly,
yeah.
I've been exposed to like all kinds of men, especially from the industry that I'm in, like a lot of wealthy men.
Mm,
Like it's just like at this point in my life, wealth kind of turns me off because um,
mm,
there's just they don't have that emotional intelligence,
mm,
Whereas because they never have had to, they've worked their whole lives, and
mm.
people give them instant gratification because they have a certain status. I hate that. Like it's such a turn off. It repulses me. Whereas this guy, he's kind of had it all, done it all, seen it all, and instead of going in a direction where he could have been a very toxic guy. I mean, he's not an ugly guy.
Mm,
He's not
mm.
like, I mean, when you look at him, he looks like someone who could be pretty, like, like what they call them F boys, right? But
Yeah.
he decided to take his own personal development in a completely different direction. And that's why we
Mm,
were able to attract each other, because we really have spent a lot of time alone, and we didn't go down that path of going from person to person, relationship to relationship. We valued
mm.
our independence and our alone time and our own growth. And so I don't remember what we were talking about, what the point was,
You
but
didn't have like, no, I was talking about like when a lot of guys are, I don't want women who are divorced, I don't want women
oh
with
yes.
children,
So I like
you
like I
know.
was saying, I was like that as well. But
Mm,
it takes a very unhealthy minded person to be like, I don't want this, I don't want that, when they're coming from the same
mm.
background, right? Like, how dare you say you don't want divorced and whatever, when you're not the cream of the crop either, right? And right. So like, I mean, I was like that as well. But the thing is, you have to be open minded, and um, men, I don't want to generalize, but I haven't come across too many men who have taken their emotional intelligence into their own hands, and
Mm,
kind of grown up. I'll be honest, not here, not in
yeah.
Canada at least. I don't know what it's like in Dubai or the UK. I've had very little exposure to both, but
I mean,
um,
the UK is really difficult because my experience growing up in the UK was just, there was a lot of misogyny.
oh
There
yeah,
was a lot of, a lot of people came that migrated to the UK were, just hardworking grafters, not
hmm
necessarily educated. And
hmm
so it was kind of reaping what they sowed. And so a lot of the guys that I grew up with, they just knew what they saw in their
What
families.
UK did you grow up
And it
in?
was, sorry?
What part of UK did you grow up in?
London,
Oh,
London. So
okay.
the east of London, yeah.
Mhm.
And then, but my family was has always been very, very different. I came from a very kind of educated, a very open minded family. My dad's from India. My mum grew up in Pakistan. And
Mhm.
so it was, but my mum's family, everyone moved to the UK when they were quite young. So it was just, we were always very open to other kind of cultures, religions, diversity. And it makes a hell of a difference because the
Totally.
upbringing was very different. And a lot of the guys that I met were just
Backwards.
really, really typical. Yeah. And even my mum used to say about my ex-husband, she was like, are you sure he didn't grow up in Pakistan? Like, have you checked his birth
Well,
certificate?
my exposure to the men from the UK is that they're very, like, they haven't evolved, you know?
That's exactly it. Yeah.
they haven't evolved. They're like stuck in this like gown, like we call it a gown, like a village, and like the way their opinions of women is so honestly disgusting. Like,
Yeah,
to
I
the
agree.
extent we haven't seen that level of small-mindedness in Canada, even though we don't have like the most amazing men. But I feel like it's the expectation they have of women is very like from like 4 generations ago, right? And so I feel like it's very different in different parts of the world. I mean, even like
Mm.
American men, I feel like are a lot more driven in terms of their career
Mm.
versus Canadian men who are kind of like, they're more lax, right? And again, these are all
Mm.
generalizations. This doesn't go, I'm sure there's
So
no.
what's really interesting, living in the Middle East, is that there's such a huge like diaspora here. And so I have met people from everywhere, from Canadians to Americans to, obviously I'm very familiar with the Brits, from India, from Pakistan, and it just, I actually agree with what you're saying, because I
Mhm.
have like some of my closest friends are from America, and there were the family from Canada, um, and I see all the differences, and I think actually they're so different to the British men, like very, very different. Again, it is a generalization, but I
Mhm.
feel like I've been around long enough to be able to kind of make that generalization. And
Mhm.
then, you've got the Pakistanis who are very kind of open, very, I mean, for lack of a better word, not modern, but progressive in a
Right.
lot of ways. And then I compare it to like the Brits. I'm like, wow, you guys are still like, you're still there. It's
Mhm.
insane. And
Mhm.
so part of me is like, I don't know if I'm ever going to meet anybody.
Oh, you will.
I wouldn't say no. I'm
Mhm.
open to it, but again, back to the beginning of a conversation, and it really has to be someone that's going to bring value to my life.
Yeah.
And I know
Has to be a lot of
exactly.
value because you can do everything for
Mm,
yourself at this point. Like,
well, this
there's
is it.
nothing
Yeah,
we get at this age, we feel like there's nothing we need a man for. Like,
yeah,
bills, we got our bills. Like, you want to put up a painting in your wall, you can do that. I can take my own
oh
garbage
yeah.
out. Thank you so much. I'll get 5 jobs to keep up with my interest rates, right? You don't
Exactly.
need a
Yeah.
man for anything at this point. But so the value has to be very deep and different than what we were seeking at 22, 23, 24.
Absolutely. And the value that you're showing your child, right? Like for you, you have a daughter, and to show that, you can be strong, you can be independent, you can do all these things, but you can also fall in love with again. And
Mhm.
there is, there are people that are, that, inshallah, he is the one for you, someone that was
Mhm.
made for you. And I
Yeah.
think you said like we weren't even supposed to meet, but I actually believe you were. Like
Yeah.
you are supposed to meet the person
Totally.
that you are meant to be with.
Mhm.
I show Aman all the time that, it's okay to have a wife who is a woman in your life that is like this and can do all these things. And what
Right.
you need to be bringing, I want to groom him to be a good husband and
Good.
be all those things that,
Mhm.
women look for, the emotional intelligence. I
Mhm.
mean, my son is, I'm telling you, he's a lost cause now. He's going to come home
No,
with,
he's not. He has such a great.
well, he's he's gonna be, I don't know. Mashallah, no, he's an amazing kid, and I can't complain. Like,
Mhm.
alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, I couldn't ask for
Mashallah. Good.
um anyone better than him.
Mhm.
But it's again, it's an evolving journey,
Mhm.
and we're still learning.
Yeah.
Um, and on that note, I want to, before we do finish, I want to ask you. So I've been asking all my guests. Obviously, the show is called "What's Brown Got to Do with It?" So
Mhm.
I want to ask you, what does being brown mean to you?
Good
What
question.
has being brown got to do with it for you?
Well, brown. I mean, like I'm Pakistani. My parents are from Pakistan. I was born in Saudi Arabia. So like, I guess when I think of brown, I'm thinking about my like cultural side of my life. And I there's a lot of parts of my culture that I love. And so when I think about the positives, and how they've shaped me into the person that I am, I think about all the, I guess, the cultural values that my parents instilled in me, and that's what brown probably means
Mm,
to me. The modesty that comes with our culture sometimes. I love that part of it. I love, our language, and I love, um, what else? Like, I mean, of course, I love the food. So I think of all the cultural elements and how big they are for me. I'm a big, like, I love desi food. I love speaking and busting out in Urdu whenever I can. Uh, and that's a big part of my identity, right? Like my comedy
Yeah.
comes from my culture as well. Um, and so what's brown got to do with it? It has everything to do with who I am as a person. I mean, if I didn't have that kind of upbringing or cultural roots, I wouldn't be Saira, right? So
Yeah.
yeah. And then also for me, religion is a big thing. I can't ever not
Mm.
touch on religion. It is the biggest driving force in my life, and it has gotten me to where I am. And so
Same.
when I think about like culture, I also think about religion. And so brown, I mean, I don't know if it's brown, but it's like culture and religion sometimes don't go hand in hand. But for me, they're both big driving forces in who I've become as a mom, as a sister, all the different roles that I play.
And we really look forward to watching the rest of your journey.
Oh,
And
thank
inshallah,
you.
everything goes really, really well
Oh,
for you. And,
you.
he is the love of your life.
Yes.
And,
Yeah,
you get all the happiness that you deserve, because everyone deserves to be happy. And I think
of course.
we'll end it on that, on a great note. So everyone be happy, stay happy, and we will speak soon. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us
You.
today. And hopefully we'll catch up and watch your progress and talk about it a bit more in time to come.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. It was so nice speaking to you.
You too. Thank you.